Will do.
Okay, we are live on YouTube. I'm going to share my screen. And then Andy, if you want to just admit everyone that's in the waiting room, please. Hi, everyone. We are just going to give everyone a couple minutes to join. This is the Property Tax Working Group meeting on residential tax abatement policy review. I think we're just waiting on Carol, who's one of the co-chairs of the working group. We'll just give it another minute. Thanks for your patience. Okay, so we are still waiting on Carol to join, but there are some kind of agenda housekeeping notes that I want to go through before we get into the meat of the discussion. So I think I'll start with that and give her some time to join. So thanks for being on this call. This is the Property Tax Working Group meeting for the Focused Recommendation Group on Residential Tax Abatement Policy and Review. This is kind of a follow-on meeting from a meeting that was held last Wednesday, the 8th. If you weren't in that meeting, you will still see, we will be discussing all of the recommendations. Last week was kind of going through the draft recommendations, and today is really about finalizing them. So we're going to start off with a welcome and virtual meeting housekeeping. I will briefly touch on the purpose of the property tax working group and where this group has been. The meat of this meeting will be finalizing recommendations. So we have 2 hours to do that. So we have to stick on a schedule. And then next steps, which is on Thursday, July 23rd, next Thursday, there will be a property tax meeting, working group meeting on the final recommendations and report. You will receive more information about, how to sign up for that meeting and the structure of that meeting, in the next week before that meeting. We'll email you out the information and get that on our website. My name is Samantha McLean. I'm with the Department of City Planning, and I've been working with the working group in facilitating these meetings, and we're happy that you're here. Real quick with some virtual meeting housekeeping. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube as we speak. Everything in this meeting is public record, including any chats or individual messages that you would send using the chat bar. So we just wanted to make that clear. You will see that everyone arrived on this call muted, and we ask that you remain muted throughout the call unless you are a working group member that would like to speak. If you are, so we have a lot of people on this call. If you are a community member who is joining us, we ask that you use the chat bar to submit any public comment or questions. This is very similar to our in-person meetings where we ask you to fill out a comment card. I'm looking at the participants right now, and it looks like we have one call-in number, and I believe that is Heather's phone calling in. So if anyone does join us using a call-in number, I will explain it. If they can't use the chat bar, they'll be able to unmute themselves and talk. But we ask that community members use the chat bar just to make sure that we're capturing all of your comments because we will have a record of them afterwards. Working group members, feel free to unmute and mute yourself. So with that, real quick, on this call, we have Carol Gibbs and Dan Bauer, who are co-chairing this focused recommendation group. Carol is also one of the co-chairs, thanks for the wave, of the property tax working group overall. We are also joined by working group members Eve Bolton, Mark Quarry, Sharon Watkins, Paul Yankee, Callie Kaku, Heather Sturgill, and then from the law department, Caitlin Geiger, and I'm looking, if I missed you and you are a working group member, please unmute yourself now and introduce yourself, but I do think I got everyone. Okay, and of course, welcome to all the community members that are joining. So Carol or Dan, do you have anything real quick, welcoming remarks to say before we get into the work? Oh, Carol, you're unmuted. Or you're muted, yeah.
Thanks for everybody being here, and thanks for putting up with all of this. It's been a long process. Yeah,
so on that note, for anyone that hasn't been involved, I think, I see a lot of familiar faces, but we are at the end of a over a year and a half process with over 15 meetings, including some public meetings, 2 surveys with over 650 responses. So back in January, draft recommendations were presented, and right now it's about finalizing them. So this has been an involved process with a lot of stakeholders. So we're nearing that. So with that, today we're going to look at the recommendations and finalize them. The recommendations that you might have seen previous to this back in January, or even in last week's meeting, the structure has changed a little bit just because of conversations that this focused recommendation group has been having. So right now the structure is kind of in 4 sections. So section 1 is immediate recommendations, something that can be moved on quickly. Section 2 is what do these recommendations aim to achieve? Section 3 are considerations for implementation. So when these recommendations are being implemented, what are things that need to be considered during the rollout? And then Section 4 is a long-term recommendation. We will move through each of those sections. Just a note that we are working in Google Docs and Google Spreadsheet today so that we can make sure that editing is happening in real time. If you are having any difficulty reading something, let us know in the chat bar, and I will try to zoom in and manipulate the screen in the best way possible. But I do know that this is a little tricky. So any notes in blue that you see on the screen, they were submitted by working group members in advance of the meeting. And then any public comment that was submitted to me has been sent to the co-chairs of this group and to the co-chairs of the property tax working group. So with that, we'll move directly to immediate recommendations. So the first recommendation is the recommendation that will determine the criteria, the caps, and the terms. So let's move, oops. So option A was presented by Carol and Dan at the last meeting. Carol, Dan, do you have anything to say about this option? We'll go option by option and introduce them, and then we'll talk about where we're going to land in terms of the final recommendation.
It was just really a starting point for conversation. It was what we thought was the most simple and easiest to use at the time.
Great. And then just in addition, there was a working group member who submitted some comment just about needing some clarification on the green building tiers. Anything else on option A, Carol?
Not I, Dan. You know anything about the green tiers?
No, I think we'd anticipated that needed to be fleshed out further. So her question was the same as mine.
Okay, thanks. Option B was presented by Paul Yankee, a working group member last week. And Paul, I'm gonna ask you now to kind of explain this option and how it's changed. And then I'll discuss some of the public or the working group feedback that we've received.
Sure. Yes, so this was in response to a number of the similar comments. One, the change that we made since the one we had there was just to make it a little more simple on the split here. So trying to put it out in two categories. So the new construction criteria and separate out the renovation criteria. I think much easier to see the tiers in each type of construction, right? Because you're going to be in one or the other, instead of the every other and the other tiers. I thought that was helpful. A number of people said that would be needed. I think there might be a couple pieces of a couple numbers that may have changed a little bit, trying to get and this was again recommendations, trying to get the numbers pretty consistent with what the investment amounts would be. Definitely the visibility piece, you'll see is the same. You'll see that in option C. So that was added as 100,000. And let's see, I think besides dollar amounts, the only other thing that changed was adding the historic, and this was a great discussion that we had about some of the definitions of restoration and renovation, and really just how deep certain projects go and where the incentive is needed. And is there needed at certain types of buildings, is there needing even an additional incentive to make sure that they go, they get the money they need, right? And the incentive they need to actually restore it, instead of letting the easy answer be let the building go. And so we tried to come up with a middle ground there. I did put in very clearly our opinion that because of that and the type of buildings those are, a lot of times what we see in historic is the kind of, let's say 1940, maybe that range, that's open to discussion. Masonry buildings, those are some of the ones that have the worst outcomes if not done correctly. So we would highly recommend from the building community and from the green community, but all performance community, that it has some minimum quality standard put on it, like the HERS or LEED kind of requirements, but it could be suited for historic buildings. That's the gist of the changes.
And so just, I wanted to read, and actually Heather, since you're on the call right now, I don't know, you submitted comments on this option. Do you want to kind of give your feedback on this option, or? Oh, Heather, you're muted still.
Am I still on?
You're good now, we can hear you.
Okay. So I believe my comments were related to, well, you had a couple things about why incentivize something that people are going to do anyway. I fully support that. And towards that end, I was wondering if the new construction gold should be brought down to the renovation silver, and new construction platinum be brought down to the renovation gold. Like, bring those down so that you get so much more for renovation than you do for new construction.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's the main thing. What else was there? Oh, and there are other things that might come up in the future that we want to incentivize. And I know that adding years hasn't traditionally been a good incentive. But when we're talking these high numbers, you know, maybe we not do 15, we do 12 as the top amount of years. And then if there's something that comes up in the future, then what we do is we simply add years of whatever the renovations or whatever the level they're getting, they can add up to 3 years of that.
Sure. That's
So,
perfect. Go ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Paul.
I just want to support a couple of those. So yeah, one on the years, that's a great point. And we brought that up. It's not been a bad thing. Remember when the abatement was started, you know, we were just trying to get people to move in the city, right? 20 years ago. And then when we've added things, the years have kind of stayed up near that top, except for renovations, until finally we got them up equal at the max. But you're right, it's capped out legally. It cannot go any higher than 15 years. So we don't have any room to move that dial anymore. And so I do think if this gets into a longer discussion, especially on the tiers and things like that, I think that should be adjusted for exactly that reason. I think you're going to need to move that dial as well, to give room for other things. 100% agree. It'll get nuanced, right, on which gets incentivized, but you're exactly right. It's kind of handcuffed us a little bit. As far as moving the dollar amounts, so I think this is a good starting point. And remember, this is already a reduction in a lot of ways, right? So it's a reduction of all the new construction, non-LEED stuff is reduced a lot. That's a big chunk. And then renovations, you know, yes, those were increased, but then all the unlimited is gone, right? So there is no unlimited. So there's some chunks gone. The exact where it falls, we do know, and Dan brought this up last time, the gaps between them will really matter as far as whether or not you're really incentivizing anything. Otherwise, you'll just have policy to have policy, which nobody wants. But the exact dollars, I do think, and I'm hoping the process after this has some scoring that DCD gets to do. And I think you're exactly right. There's definite possibilities, as long as it stays renovation higher than the other and the gaps stay big enough. If DCD can work with some of the data we have on the market and what's been selling and what's been happening, I think you can come up with tweaks. I'm not locked into any of those numbers. I think they can move potentially.
And so I'm going to continue with just some feedback from working group members that I don't believe are on the call right now. And then we'll move to option C for just like kind of description of it. And then we'll open the conversation to where things might move or land. So we did receive some feedback from a working group member that believes that the zero, not offering anything for new construction without any green building is going too far. Robbie Suggs from Homebase said that she prefers option B if this is the option that will secure the most affordable housing. So
Yeah,
affordable
I don't think that holds, but
Oh.
I think that's changed, but
Okay. Yeah, and once again, those were kind of based on the option B that was submitted previously. So at this point, Carol, do you want, I know you submitted this third option following the meeting last week. Can you explain kind of how you came up with this?
well, basically, I feel that there needs to be some categories that do not have LEED attached to them. And, the remodel restoration, which really could be remodel renovation, could be lesser in amount. I mean, if you are going to do a kitchen and a bathroom and replace carpet with hardwood floors, it's not going to be 300,000. But I also don't believe that there should be a LEED conversation through that. And this really does afford looking at for affordable housing. And the restoration, the other piece that I put in here was restoration, minimum 500,000 with a cap of 750,000, and it has a 15-year. And that's really for taking some of our old homes in Mount Auburn that are not being taken care of, that are just sitting there, and trying to restore them back to the quality that they were at when they were first built. That does not mean storing every every piece of that house, but simply allowing it to live again. Paul and I have gone back and forth on that definition of restoration. And we've taken away the additional term for visitability.
Okay, thanks, Carol. At this point, if there are any questions from the working group to like if you have any clarification questions, we'll get into a discussion later, but if you have any clarification questions, now's the time to ask. And then also,
sorry, we just get a question for clarification. What is the difference between term renovation in option B and then the restoration and remodel in option C? And then additionally, is the cap the total value of the renovation?
Thanks, Andy. And I failed to introduce, we have some city planning staff on the line. We have Andy Yingling, who is going to be monitoring the chat bar, Scott Gaffer, who's going to be taking notes. So thanks for that, Andy. Paul or Carol, do you want to answer the question about?
I couldn't hear the question. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, what is the difference between renovation in option B and then restoration / remodel in option C?
It's just the overall definition of those two words, or the particular line item?
I think the question is reading the overall definition, kind of what's the what differentiates the two.
Well, here's my issue and why I have chosen to change some of this wording. The word renovation has been used across the board, and renovation seems to be being abused right now. The example I was given was houses being torn down to the foundation and a new house built on that foundation and then being called renovation. If you call something remodel, it's a little more difficult to abuse that. I can't remodel my kitchen and then call it, a new house. Same with having a new house and calling it a remodel. So it really is just a matter of terminology. Restoration to me is taking an old building and making it beautiful again. So
there is a desire on behalf of the working group to, whatever word is used, to have an asterisk next to it to avoid the tear down to the foundation. Is that what I'm hearing?
For me, it's that, some of this has been abused, and I think renovation is one of the things that's been abused by people who want to get away with having a new house and having it be a renovation as opposed to being part of a new build. I don't know, I'm not sure exactly why someone would do that, but I'm trying to eliminate some of that abuse and give people a little more leverage as to what they want to do in their homes. And all of this, by the way, he has to go through legal, because it may not fly when it gets there.
Samantha, this is Eve Bolton. One of the things I like about that language, or even specifically the word remodel, is that I think it helps open this whole program, whole effort up to more, shall we say, family folks, individual developers, or people that are homeowners. Remodeling is a much more inclusive word, and people might be able to understand that communication. They're not thinking that they're renovating or restoring as much as individuals might be remodeling something. So I think the language is more inclusive. Not that we get rid of the other words, but that word is included as well.
Thanks, Steve. And real quick, that there was a question, excuse me, to clarify what you mean by cap. Could someone from the working group please define that?
When you say cap, you mean on the cap of the dollar amount. So that's the max of abated, the max of improved value, max amount of improved value that you could abate. So for like new construction, you know, silver there 400,000. That means if you build a $250,000 house, you could only abate up to 250 on that house. But if it was a $450,000 house, it could only go to 400 if you admit that level only.
Yeah, I'm curious, Paul, why you've got a $100,000 cap on the restoration of an old building.
Not a cap, but an additional cap. So what is this was
Where's the original?
Any renovation. So if anything in the renovation side would be there, so anytime you're taking an existing building and you're improving the value, right? If you fall under the renovation criteria, but if this is where we're, you know, our conversation trying to take the ones that really do actually have an additional cost to try to restore, going deeper and restoring a building has additional cost to do that. Then, and we try to define that, then yeah, give them an additional cap that would add on to that to make some of those changes. So again, most of the time we see that with the bigger numbers, but hopefully that was the thought of being able to help with that.
And I am hearing that there are maybe some comments in the chat bar that are related to these three options. Andy?
Yeah, we're getting a few comments about, one of them is the pre-1940 should also apply to multi-unit inner city buildings that are shells to begin with. These require investment more than 300,000, and then historic tax credits distinguish between the terms restoration and renovation. So I think that could maybe help to clarify that terminology. One just popped up as well. But
actually, can I answer a question on that? That was actually really interesting. The multi-unit, remember in the residential tax abatement, it does include one family, two family, 3 and 4s, maybe, right? So maybe on the 4s, if we get that in. So interestingly enough, we got rid of the unlimited. In all of our proposals here, the unlimited went away. But there are right now some 3 families that are putting in about $1 million into something. So into the building, especially some OTR historic rehabs. So keep that in mind that we get to 4 families and we talk about quality, you know, 4-unit buildings and upgrades, maybe on historic buildings. Those dollar amounts being a little higher, they're not unlimited. They're not 2 million, 3 million or anything like that, but being a little higher, especially in renovation, might come into play because this is not, it's not per unit, right? That's for the whole building. Unless there was some creative way to add, if there was other units, you could add more. That's something to keep in mind. And maybe Julie was talking about that, I think, on her comment.
Yeah, and I should know, so this is the first recommendation in immediate recommendations. We will go back after we have a resolution on this option. We will discuss the second recommendation, which is about the eligibility based on units. So that conversation is coming. It seems like at this point, you know, each of the options have been presented. There's been some commentary on that. do any other working group members want to, at this point, give your input or comments on these three options, because we will start writing.
I think that the three options don't have to stay in concrete. I mean, if somebody sees a line item in one of them that says to them, I don't like that, but I like the rest of that plan, then we should be able to massage that some way.
That's right.
Absolutely. It's so in this lower right-hand corner, I'm going to be copying and pasting whatever you tell me to move, and we'll be crafting it here. So it's certainly not one or the other.
Samantha, can I make one more point on the tiers? I know people have brought up again about simplicity, and I just want to make sure we realize too, and I think I had some of these in notes, the current CRA new construction has 7 total tiers. The current remodeling has 8. That's in the current one we have right today. All of these options have less. So,
but the 8th one was the no maximum platinum, wasn't it?
Correct. So yeah, so all of these are reducing. So that's what I mean. All of these only have 3, 4, or 5 tiers plus visibility and maybe an add-on. So already this is getting much simplified. But again, I'll make that case to make it is absolutely, I will tell you the criteria keeping it the 3 tiers in new construction and the 4 tiers of advanced, high performance building is very important to move the market. There's not really a natural gap of a 2-tier system. It wouldn't work that way, not based on the programs that are out there. So I just wanted to bring that up. If anybody wondered why I put in, the original still 3 and 4, we had 2. I think the goal was simplification. I think we got that with these recommendations.
Okay.
Anyway.
To Carol's point earlier, I about the $500,000 investment in pre-1940 homes. Maybe we could add that. So if we reduced the 15-year term to 12 years, and then if they're doing that $500,000 investment, that's where we could add an additional 3 years to bring it up to the 15. And then there was a speaker earlier or a comment earlier about the 4 families. And maybe that's where we add, if they're doing a 4 family and putting in a certain amount of investment, they're eligible for an additional 3 years.
Yeah, the 4 families I don't believe would fit into that pre-1940 homes.
Right, I'm saying that make that a new bonus.
Okay, cool.
Samantha, this is Eve again. I do like Heather's idea about the year span or the range of years as giving more opportunity for some movement and what have you. So I think that's interesting to me.
Any other feedback from working group members right now?
The other thing that my own plan, that the restoration, I guess, doesn't really need to have a minimum on it. Or if it does, it doesn't need to be 500,000. I could see some restorations being less than 500,000, as long as that cap stays there.
So since we're on the renovation topic, and based on the format can change, I think just for the sake of this meeting, I'm just going to say renovation in one area and then new construction, try to keep it separate just for clarification. But it seems like the biggest difference between option B and option C with the renovation, remodel, restoration is that option C has 2 tiers, and then option B has those 4 options.
We don't have any lead penalties under new construction and remodel restoration under the initial two lines, Samantha.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. So I guess what I'm seeking now is if we were to write, or if you guys were to write the renovation criteria for your final recommendation. First of all, do you want to use the word renovation here? Do we want to say remodel?
Are we talking about the old homes?
I'm talking about everything. So like Paul has in option 8, just as a title to what is going to fall under that criteria that deals with not new construction. So is it renovation, or do we want separate categories?
Somebody else should speak to that.
Well, I think, to Carol's point, we want to keep away from anyone tearing down a home and just using the foundation as, what they say meets the criteria for renovation. And I like the restoration being a separate category, indicating, pre-1940 home. But then an additional line, even beyond what is there under bonus criteria, that says if you're putting in over 500,000, then you get an additional 3 years.
And in that case, and Carol, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but in that case, if the 3 extra years are being added, then anywhere that there's a 15-year term would have to be reduced to 12,
well,
because 15.
And that's what I'm starting with is on the green side, if we bring everything down to a max of 12 years, then, and that also, and if you put in a second line under the bonus criteria of historic restoration. So you've got your base level historic restoration for, which is $100,000 for anything less than $500,000 of input into it. So, if they're restoring and there's that extra cost because they're restoring, then that $100,000 covers that. Then if they're putting in $500,000 or more into that, then there's a second line under there that we add in for this 500,000 or more investment that they can extend those years another 3 years to bring it up to 15 years.
So are you saying under restoration of pre-1940 that there would be no minimum and that would be 500,000 for 12 years? And then you're adding 3 years if you spend 500,000? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So I like where you're going. Couple things on the renovation. Well, so if I know we're talking about renovation, but it'll apply to new construction because each one, even though they are different, they compete against each other for exactly some of the goals we're trying to be careful, tear downs, things like that. We want to be careful one doesn't hit the other. So for example, if you move the base down, right, for anything above code to 12 years, then you need to do it across the board. So it would need to be new construction would have to come down to 12 and renovation, because you don't want to bring renovation down.
That's what she's saying, Paul. She's saying everything needs to go down to 12.
So I'm good with that. But then we'd also want to then drop. So the renovation without anything, right? Just you can renovate for whatever. That would want to come down. So that math there, and again, we can score it, but roughly the 200 to 300 and the 10 to 15, that dollar amount was calculated out as to what would incentivize the extra work. So you'd want to bring the renovation one down to, let's say, right, 7 years. So you'd that gap, and this is what Dan talked about last time, you've got to keep the gap between one option to the next the same. If you start shrinking them, you'll just have a piece up there will never get used. So the gap between one and the other has to pay for that thing. But that would be one, and that would then only work if we keep, and that's fine, on the option B where we have the 0, right, for anything that's non, let's say, lead. That would work. You're exactly right. And that was one of the problems. We couldn't reduce the years because we had the 10-year 275 already in the tax abatement just for doing anything, just for building in the city. And so we never had that option. So I think you hit on that, Heather. That's an option now. If we got rid of the new construction, just building in the city, you could lower the years. Again,
Get rid of the new and remodel sections of C that have no lead constraints on it.
So we would be getting rid of the new construction without any lead, because as Paul said before, it's more a matter of educating builders that they can build new construction lead just as cheaply, just as inexpensively as new construction without lead.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I want to keep those two there.
Carol, I'm telling you, I do it. So it is true. At the lower income levels, not at the bigger stuff. You're agreed.
Right.
Yeah. But that's,
And the thing
what we
is,
wanted.
if we allow construction, low quality construction for those lower income homes, all we're doing is passing the cost that the builder should have of doing it they get to not do the higher quality construction, but the new homeowner, the low income resident, pays the price, because now they're paying for fixes and taking care of the property and higher energy costs and higher water costs that they wouldn't have had to before. So it'll be harder for them to stay in that property. Working in neighborhoods has already proven that it can be done. We need a concerted campaign of education.
Agreed.
So if new construction without any bells and whistles stays, can, Paul, you were mentioning the gap, like if the working group decides that you want new construction by itself to stay, then what does that do to the caps and the terms for renovation? Like, can it be, you're saying the 7-year for renovation?
Yeah, and again, we're doing with the math that we have, but I would say you try to keep it equal, right? So if, again, I would want to make sure that new construction, we've been lucky to finally get new construction and renovation equal. And now we're finally going to get renovation a little higher. That's correct. I think most people agree with that. And so we want to keep that there. So yes, if we agreed that all of the top tiers kind of went to 12 years plus some add-ons, then you would have to drop somehow the base renovation just a little lower. So if that, like I said, 7 years maybe, so you have that gap, let's say, of another, is that what it was? Because we had 12 or no, 9, would it be 9 years? So just maybe like a 3-year gap, is that right? What do we have there now? Oh, we have a 5-year gap now, plus 100. So yeah, so dropping it, let's say 5.
Samantha, can I get you to type in those other numbers next to the existing numbers so that I can kind of see what we're talking about more? Like next to 15-year, we write 12-year in the green section.
Sure.
Well, like even inside the green section.
Okay. I think at this moment, it seems like and this is where the conversation left off last time. is about the inclusion of new construction without anything, and, you know, having to decide on that before really moving forward. I know last time there was a vote with the working members that were in the meeting, and it came out tied.
But we had gotten down to 6 members. I think we've got 16 today, so let's do it again.
Okay. And then, yes, so let me just run through. Oh, wait, so what we are deciding right now is to, yes, include new construction without any green building requirements, or to not allow new construction without any additional standards. So I'm going to call your name if you're a working group member. Yes.
I think there's a couple questions that I think kind of relate to dollar amounts for new construction versus non-lead. So I want to read those off if that might be helpful. So we got one question. And this might have been answered, I might have just missed it. How did the cap numbers get determined in option B? For example, why not new construction being silver for 300, gold for 450, platinum for 600,000 versus the 400, 550, and 700? And then kind of a follow-up to that, what are the actual numbers on savings for lead 200,000 new construction versus non-lead?
So yeah, as far as the caps are concerned, again, the biggest thing is you've got to keep in mind when this original numbers were put out, which 2017 was the amendment, but the other one was done, what, 2011, is that right? Maybe when the original 400,000, then you had some before that. Though, maybe it's 14, it's 12, I think it was. Keep in mind the cost of construction right now is probably up around 50% from then, at least. And so the dollar amounts haven't changed. So it's much more expensive. That's why you don't see a lot of $300,000 new construction houses right now. And so the lead silver 400,000 mark has not increased. That's the same. Right now, new construction lead gold is 562. So 550 is roughly the same, and platinum is unlimited. So coming down to 700 is a big deal, since the average platinum right now is about 1.2 million. That's probably going.
But how many people actually use that?
I mean, there's about 20 to 30 probably a year, in that range. So it's again, $1 million home. 4 years ago there were like 6 that were done. Now there's 25 or 30. So the market moved very, very quickly. So that will change a lot, and we'll lose definitely some that won't do lead now at the top, but that's okay. Because it's very hard to do platinum, and it's very expensive for those big homes, but that's the way it should be, right? It's a curve, easy at the bottom, hard at the top. That's why those tiers have to be put there. If we restrict the top one too much, we're really going to take the biggest energy hogs and the biggest issues with land site issues, and then you're just not going to do anything extra over code. And we're 10 years behind on energy code now. So
again, the question was, how did they get determined? Just from the years from the last numbers calculated to now? Is that the answer?
Yeah, mostly keeping the lower ones at the silver and gold roughly around where they are. Well, taking the lower and gold and then severely cutting platinum, right? So platinum's not unlimited, 700.
So it's just taking into account the years, right?
And they've been 15 before, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and again, I think if the 12-year came up, it'd be very interesting. That would be, again, a 25% reduction or 20% reduction in the entire incentive. That's a big deal. And still asking someone to build the same way and the market respond the same way. But I'm saying it could happen. It could be a good spot to do. Yeah. I think the other part was the difference maybe between new and renovation. Was that the other question?
The question was, what are the actual numbers on savings for lead 200,000 for new construction versus non-lead?
Savings in what, the tax abatement?
How much it would cost, I think, to do the lead in a $200,000 home.
Oh, yeah. So again, the examples are anywhere from 0 to 20,000 for a very inexperienced person. We usually tell people it's between 0 and 10 once they've baked it into their system. And that's about right for inexperienced. But again, you'll get up in the higher ranges for platinum and gold for your bigger houses. Those can get upwards of 10% or more. So $1 million home can be 100 grand.
He's asking about energy savings.
Savings on energy,
Oh,
looks like.
the average energy savings from code right now to lead minimum, whatever the minimum is, because lead you can go all the way to 0. But the average energy savings is going to depend on the size. So it's the dollar amount's going to matter depending. So again, you can go from 10-20% is what we usually see at the very bare minimum of code, all the way to 100% savings. You could have net zero.
So in a $200,000 house, which is going to be a small house, it probably would be about $10 a month savings.
No, we ran one. That's in the packet. You guys should have that. We ran an example of one of the working in neighborhoods houses. So there's total savings of water and energy was about $44 a month. And again, they didn't say that it cost an extra $10,000, but if it did, the mortgage would have went up $44 a month at 3.5%. So it literally cost the homeowner 0. So even in the worst case scenario, and they had a better house, a healthier house, and long-term, they had lower savings forever. Pass the savings on to the consumer.
Thank you.
So since we are close to an hour in, I do want to move forward with deciding on new construction, and then we'll move forward. So once again, I'm going to ask the working group members to say whether you, yes, want to include no construction without any additional standards, or no, you do not. So first, Carol.
That was confusing to me. We are voting on whether we want to keep the new construction in C the same with no lead.
So with option A and C, there is, I'm highlighting it on the screen, there is that new construction without any green building.
Okay, I vote yes.
Let's see, Eve Bolton. Oh, it seems like you're muted.
Yes, I think that's good. We're talking about C?
We're talking about if there is going to be an option for new construction without any green building.
Yeah, I think that opens it. Yes.
Okay. Mark Corey.
Yes.
Wait a minute. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Paul Yankee.
Okay, I'm actually confused. So I'm sorry. The question we're asking is whether or not we want the new construction $200,000 one, right? So meaning that you could still build without having to go lead in new construction.
That's correct. That's correct. So yeah.
Okay.
Can you build new construction without any green building and still receive an abatement?
I would say no.
Sharon Watkins. Sharon's still on the call. Oh, it looks like she dipped out. And then Callie, I know you're new representing LISC on this. Do you have an opinion on this?
Not at this time. Thank you.
And then Heather Sturgill.
I support new construction without lead should not be included in this. I think you should have lead as a minimum for new construction.
Okay, so, and did I miss any working group members? No. Okay, so it was 3 in support of including new construction without, or being able to just have new construction without anything else. The last time that there was a vote, it came out even. But I think it's also worth mentioning, this was mentioned last time by the vice mayor, that an option with new construction without green building has been floated around. And Carol, feel free to jump in, but I know that this is an option that he felt comfortable supporting. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to put new construction. So in this gray area is where I'm kind of drafting the final recommendation. So where we're taking pieces from each with that $200 cap. And do we want to, the proposal was a 10-year term. Does that term need to change based on these conversations that we've been having?
Definitely, because if we want renovation at all, it needs to be longer or higher than new construction.
So where do we want to set the term?
Well, we would need to start from the top and work your way down. So that's kind of where, again, getting rid of the other new construction piece was important. So if you don't start from the top, so what's the top that's going to be, acceptable? And so using that, if you don't have a gap of around 150,000 probably per tier, it's not going to incentivize the next tier very well. We've seen that before, and that's currently what we have about now.
Okay, so let's work from the top down with new construction. So what would be, the highest cap and criteria for new construction? Option C has green building tier 2 new construction. Option B has a couple, new construction LEED platinum.
What about making new construction 200,000 that doesn't require LEED? Only a 5-year term.
No, that's not fair.
I like the idea of working backwards. So with what is the highest new construction criteria and cap and term? Is it tier 1? Is it LEED platinum?
So C had it at 650, right? I had it at 700 on option B. And so at the 700, I had it going back 700, then it goes 550, then 400, right? For those three. And then, right, for doing non-LEED, right now it's 275 and 10-year. And LEED is 400 and 15-year. And we still have a chunk of buildings right now. This is a problem we're trying to solve out of this. We have a chunk of buildings being new construction being built without LEED. Those people pay more for their energy and water than people in $500,000 houses in nicer neighborhoods.
So why do we need 3 levels? Is that, I know there's been conversation about trying to simplify it some for this residential side. This isn't commercial, this is residential. Is there a need to have 3 different levels?
There is, yeah, it's a big difference. It's literally the cost difference. So silver, gold, platinum is the amount of points that you get in the system, and at those points cost money. So to make that jump, to incentivize someone to put more money in, and again, the items that they put in are the items that are harder to do. The cost per point as you go up gets higher. So the platinum individuals are the ones that, again, you have that money. They're also the ones that cost the city the most amount of money, are putting it there. But platinum to silver is a monster jump. That is the right lineage. We happen to get it right a decade ago. Well, I haven't even been a decade. It's been about 8 years, 9 years now.
Dan, what is the difference? Is there really a need for a 3rd tier?
I think the pure volume, I think remembering our research, I think there's 67 CRAs in the city today that take advantage of the current LEED platinum uncapped abatement. So I can't really forecast how many people, will choose to do LEED platinum when we modify the program, but I can point out that there are more platinum abatements, I think, to Paul's point, than there are those in the uncapped tier. So I can't.
And we got rid of one, just so you know.
Okay, Paul, let him finish.
Yeah, well, I can't really, forecast what's the perfect amount of abatement to make them take the action. I think the better question would be, if we're going down to 2 tiers, are you putting silver with gold or gold with platinum? Like, which do you feel like is the harder of those to
Yeah.
achieve?
And what's your opinion?
I have not been as close to the scoring system for LEED on the residential side to really have an educated opinion.
Okay, that's fair.
Again, this is, I'm just, there's 4 levels of LEED. We got rid of the bottom one because it was unnecessary. So we already cut one of the 4. That was the LEED certified level. That's why we only have the 3. So we've already been reducing. So we've done that stripping. These are the 3 most basic levels. And it was really smart of Cincinnati. Again, a lot of other cities did not do that. They've been very jealous. I've got multiple cities across the US that are literally trying to replicate this right now. So.
And it doesn't, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like where there's any changes being actually made in B from the current plan, except for the amounts being raised, the caps being raised.
Yeah.
Am I not?
Well, not caps being raised. We got rid of the unlimited. That's one of the #1 reasons that people wanted to get rid of that.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody was using that, Paul. I mean, I think that was just sitting there on the books. I don't think anybody was using it.
Well, no, the people were using it were the ones that weren't ever going to do this work. They were small, but it was a lot. It was millions and millions of dollars.
Okay. All right.
Being invested. Yeah, it was. Remember, this is about equity. So remember, the lower tiers are going to have higher quantity, right? The higher tiers are going to have lower quantity, but that's also harder to do. So this literally, that's why LEED happens to be the right system, because it's built in that manner.
It just looks like it looks like the current plan, only the amounts are higher and the years, the terms are more. I don't see any difference other than that.
For new, the amounts aren't higher, they're lower. 400's the same, 550 is $12,000 lower, and 700,000 is a lot lower than unlimited.
275.
275 is for non-LEED.
LEED certified, 275, 12 years.
We got rid of certified level. Got rid of it because it wasn't being used.
Ah, okay. Well, it's on my current list.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, because you're right. It was, if you're going to get certified, you just went to silver. There was no reason, so we got rid of it to simplify.
So we do have a lot to get through, and I do want to make a decision. To keep this, I want to be respectful of people's time too. So I mean, we're basically between 2 tiers or these 3 options. Is there a downside to having the 3 options that are in option B, besides the fact that it looks a little similar to what exists now? Is there a major concern? Okay.
Not for me, no.
Okay, then I'm going to move that down. So are we comfortable with the caps that were associated with those new construction? I'm going to move that down so you can see the 400, 550, and 700,000, or do they need to be adjusted?
If we have to have 3 tiers, I think the amounts are fine.
Okay. Then why we were working backwards was to determine kind of the terms.
Actually, I was wondering if we can make the new construction for gold the same as the renovation of silver, so 500 rather than 550, and the new construction for platinum the same as the renovation of gold. So platinum would go from 7 down to 650, because we're trying to really incentivize renovation, because in all honesty, that is the better thing to do as far as sustainability and stuff like that.
Yeah, so Heather, so at each one they should be, right? So they should be $100,000 more at every level for renovation. And that math works out to be about $2,500 a year in savings if you max it out, right? So if you're at the right level, and the market has been very efficient at this. They figure out the right amount to invest. Very few invest more than they need to. So they invest exactly the amount they need to. So at that point, it's $2,500 a year. And on 15 years, that's about $37,000 of kind of basic savings, lifetime savings. Time value of money, it's probably worth about 25 grand. So that extra 25,000 at those tiers makes sense. That's the extra cost a lot of times, usually on the renovation. It gets more than that when you start getting up into the big ones. That's why I liked Carol's idea of like the historic, more restoration oriented, maybe again, the harder buildings, maybe even having that additional $100,000 cap. Depends on where you define that. I mean, technically, if you use even what I put in there, that would be a lot of OTR buildings.
I'm going to go on record to actually agree with Karen, which is probably the very first time in this whole year happened. And I don't want anyone to get into the feeling that that's going to happen a lot. The point is that if someone's dealing with platinum, they can afford to pay their property taxes.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. They will. I mean, they're.
Sorry,
again,
Karen, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah. So that given the $100,000 difference, that's the only thing.
But I think we could reduce that and it would be fine. I don't think anybody building in platinum really needs 700,000. I mean, I think that's the point. So,
the average platinum house is 1.2 million.
And again, if they can afford platinum, they probably can afford to pay their property taxes.
Right.
What Heather's saying is we should reduce that amount, and I'm agreeing with her.
So if we reduce new construction platinum to renovation gold, which Heather, I believe is what you were saying, and then new construction gold to renovation silver, which is, oh, not that, which is 500.
Yeah, put another zero down there.
Oh, yeah, thank you. We're not changing it that much. Does that work for everyone?
Yep.
Okay.
Wait, what does silver go to?
Silver remains the same. Or Heather, did you have a suggestion with that?
No, I think.
No, I don't.
Okay.
50, what is it, 650, and then what, 550, and then 500, and then 400.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It's not a lot of it. So the incentive will be a little shy from silver to gold. So you'll have a lot will stay in silver and then not make the jump. We have 10 years of history of seeing this in the market. So I mean, there's literally no one in the country that knows more about what will actually incentivize these. So that will shrink some people doing the extra amount, which is some of the higher cost things for the city.
So $50,000 is that much of an incentive?
It's worth $1,200 a year times 15 years, so it's about 18,000.
It's a trip to Hawaii.
Well, these are for $500,000 homes, which right now, oddly enough, in a lot of neighborhoods are starter. Yeah, it's interesting. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Well, I have a question then, because we're wanting to incentivize good quality housing, energy efficiency, stuff like that. Is there a huge difference in quality of house between those two? I mean, like, is it that huge of a difference?
Well, and the other thing, Heather, is that we're trying to promote housing, new housing in other areas besides Hyde Park and Mount Lookout and Mount Adams, so are there $400,000, $500,000, and $650,000 worth of house being built in Walnut Hills and Evanston and Mount Auburn? And, I think that's really the question that should be asked.
Well, and that actually kind of brings me back to the new construction, because if we don't incentivize quality construction, and these are going
We
into
already
low
voted
income
on that, Heather.
neighborhoods. Okay.
And
We have, go ahead.
In the considerations for implementation that we will be getting to shortly, it says, I believe there's a recommendation about reviewing this criteria on a 3 to 5 year basis. So I think, that allows some room to kind of reflect on what's been happening or what happens with these, and then leave some room for changes in the future.
Well, and we also have to take it on the 23rd to the big group
Exactly.
discussion, so.
So,
Sweet. Yeah.
okay, I would like to move on to renovation and remodel restoration, but I need some terms for yearly terms for new construction. It seems like a lot of the bonus year terms were for renovation, remodel, restoration. So
I think the first one could be remodel renovation. And we can reduce that amount if the group feels that that's what should happen. I'm okay with that.
I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. So for new construction,
Oh, sorry.
so it, before we were discussing about reducing the year terms for remodel renovation because of maybe offering an additional few years for certain criteria, which would so we couldn't have terms up to 15 years. It seems like for new construction, there's the extra bonus criteria for visitability with an additional cap, but there would not be additional years. So do you want a 15-year term?
But if we make a 15 term in new, you have to do 15 in renovation. You can, if we make those off, then we'll get more like we won't have solved one of the problems we were trying to solve.
Okay.
We definitely want them to be at least equal if we're changing the dollar amounts. That's probably the right way to go. So if we do 12, we need to do 12 down. If we do 15, we need to do 15 down.
Okay.
That's my opinion. But I don't want to go backwards. I definitely want to renovate. I don't think the group does. We go backwards on the renovation side.
So do we want to put in 12 as a placeholder for right now and then move on to renovation? Is that, or do we just want to leave it blank and circle back after we have the renovation terms?
Well, what about 12 for all the lead, 7 for new construction and 10 for renovation?
We're just talking about new construction right now.
Yes.
We're not talking about renovations yet. We can do the 200 new construction at 10. That's what I had it before, and 15 for the rest.
Okay. So for renovation, remodel, restoration, I'm sorry, Carol, you did say something about this first line. And
Yeah, the top line could be remodel renovation as opposed to restoration, because it really isn't restoration. And it could be reduced. We could put it to 200 if that's what people would like.
This is Caitlin. Just by way of background, the existing CRA ordinance for residential uses the term remodeling, since that is what is in the statute. Just by way of information.
Thank you.
So we should take renovation off of that.
That would be my preference, but it's not.
Okay, all
legally
right, that's cool.
required.
That works.
Be consistent.
That works.
okay. So we have, basic remodel at 200,000, which is from option B. In terms of the remodel with the green building, since we use the LEED Silver, LEED Gold, LEED Platinum tiers, I'm assuming we would use the same tiers for remodel, correct?
Right.
Okay, let me insert.
At least, and then obviously we're pitching for the one other one, which we have right now. It's the HERS tax abatement. We're actually going to be it's going to getting adjusted a little bit, but yes, that's the lower. So that's not quite all the way to LEED, Carol's point. So even a little bit easier. It's more about market transparency so that buyers can see what they're buying. So we don't have the painting of the pigs kind of theory and people getting into situations they can't afford the house on flips that are low quality. So,
and with these remodel levels, are we comfortable with the caps as they're written right now? Or do they need to be adjusted?
A quick question on the caps. We had a question about, seems that the numbers for the caps haven't been vetted as to why they're needed at the levels proposed. Is there some type of documentation where these can be studied?
I mean, Dan, do you want to speak to that? I mean, and Samantha, maybe what, when we're done with this, right, this is the working group giving this proposal right to council. Council obviously could have tweaks and everything else. I mean, going from there, but when does economic development get involved, before or after, a stamp of approval, right? So I think that might be part of the question.
This is Dan. We would, when the working group has a final recommendation, we would take that and discuss it with our city manager. We haven't yet done that because this is still in draft form. I would say that if you go and you look up, the auditor does have a lot of the data on what abatements are given out presently that I think would be helpful.
It's true. But you're saying you would have the opportunity to be able to look at least some, may not be a full blown, but to be able to get to some scoring, hopefully, of impact and numbers prior to council having to vote on anything. I mean, you'll have some time.
Well, yeah, and I would say also, I mean, the current program, I mean, I think I've mentioned this before in the last meeting, but 80% of the tax abatements presently are within the base cap of the 275, just based on the auditor's data of the abated value he's attributing to the properties.
That's right.
So it looks like Samantha's computer did have some technical difficulties, so she will be back. But I think if we can just continue the discussion, right? She will be back shortly.
So one thing I know that Paul, I believe it was Paul, pointed out that we're not going to be able to do a couple of the suggestions that Carol wanted, as far as the 500,000 bonus years, if there's no opportunity for bonus years.
Say that again.
So we had talked about the HERS. Paul put out in his proposal that there was a $100,000 bonus if they did remodel at the HERS level, the restoration. There was a $100,000 bonus for restoration, for any restoration. And you were saying that there was a need for an additional bonus for restoration with $500,000 or more investment.
Yeah, I wanted to have, go ahead.
If we make everything 15 years and don't make it 12 years, then there's no room for that additional category for people that are doing $7,000 or more.
Yeah, what I had suggested to Paul before the other night was that, I really want to keep that restoration without that lead criteria for the old homes and the cap 750. And to make sure that people who are buying those homes to do those restorations to have education about the lead process. But I don't want is someone to have to get into the cost of totally reventing or whatever to try and get that. So if they have an old home that is just going to be outrageous in cost to get that done, I don't want them to have to do that. I want these homes to be restored. I want them to be rebirthed, and I don't want that to have to be done. But I do feel like those people who buy those homes should have the education to know how to do it and why it would be a good thing for them to do if possible.
Right, and to incentivize that, we need you know, that extra oomph there, we need a space for extra oomph. And if our starting point is 15 years all the way down, there's no space for that extra oomph that is necessary.
But I'm not talking about an extra oomph. I'm talking about it remaining. He's changed it so that that it fits into just a normal renovation remodel. And then he's saying if it's historic, that it's $100,000 additional cap. And I'm saying it needs to be its own separate category.
Heather, I think we'll get to that when we start doing the terms here, but you're right. I mean, yeah, if it goes to 15, it'll push us in the overall remodel. There's some details there, specifically what Carol's working, I think is another nuance. Like that's important. That's a separate item. We'll see that when we put these on here.
And I'm sorry, I've been having some computer issues. I'm back on now. I hope you can see my screen again. Were we talking about that last bit, the historic renovation, restoration?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, where are we landing on that?
I don't know that we landed.
Okay.
I think we're still flying around in the air.
So
I think we were coming in for a landing.
and Eve, where do you think it was going to land?
Probably in the wrong city.
So it seems like the option is include it as, you know, under the remodel criteria as its own separate thing, or include it as a bonus criteria. Are those the two options right now?
I think this, and maybe Carol and I have used terms maybe a little differently, but I think we got really close. But maybe it's a definition item first. We're trying to incentivize. I will say my understanding in this has been, I think, at least my take, is that it's more of some of the bigger, deeper, harder ones. And again, that they would get that, and trying to define it. That's, leaving it open, unfortunately, I trust all my builders and developers and rehabbers. I trust them all, right? But if you leave things too open, I do feel that some things get out there. They'll ask for, and people already have. So what would be that line? What does that mean? To get the under 1,000, what do I do? And I want to make sure that if someone's going to get extra money or extra incentive, they're doing something we want them to do. So we'd have to be very defined line. If we can find that, then I'm all in. This was just one attempt on this. We threw that out there based on some historic consultants and others.
Again, incentives with a price that people can't pay for becomes a punishment.
Sure. No, absolutely. I mean, it's just a goal. However we want to incentivize, I'm open. But I think the definition might be the most, kind of the important part. I don't know if
we put in a minimum of 500,000, but if we're, that's just simply so that it remains its own category. If it gets moved and it isn't its own category, it doesn't need that $500,000 minimum.
Great point, Carol. Thank you. No, that's right. I think you said that earlier too. So I don't know if we caught that. Now you say it. I remember you saying that earlier. Okay.
It's not Anne Frank's house, Paul.
So it's.
Can't wait to go with that.
Carol, the option C that you proposed, it was included in remodel. Paul's option was bonus criteria, but from what you just said, Carol, it seems like you would be comfortable putting it in bonus criteria. Is that correct? As long as, the definition, it's well defined?
Because, we're already getting remodel of 200,000. And if they do HERS or other moderate level E and high performance, then they're already getting another 100,000.
Well, I'm assuming that this is not going to be abused, but remodeling a 1970 house or remodeling a 1920 house is two totally different things in terms of financial commitment.
Right, which is why, we're already starting with those, but then we do a bonus if it's a 1940s house or less, or earlier, of 100,000.
If that is the will of the group, I'm fine.
It was a question.
If it's the will of the group, I'm fine with it.
Does that work? Anyone else have any concerns about that? If so, bring it up now.
Please.
Okay. Okay. So on the screen right now, you can see historic renovation restoration pre-1940 masonry building is an additional cap of 100,000. Are we adding that HERS lead requirements or just leaving it as a historic renovation?
No, because they can get the historic HERS requirement and get 300,000, and then you add on
Got it.
the historic.
Works. That makes sense to me.
Wait a minute, what? I'm sorry. So
I'm asking if there was an additional HERS requirement for the historic renovation restoration.
So yeah, so if you did not do that, then you could do the 200,000 plus 100, right? Otherwise it would be 300 plus the 100, or yeah. Yeah, I think that's fine. Here's my issue. My only concern is that your remodels then now go back up to 300,000 forever. Let's just use it over the Rhine. That's gonna be every over the Rhine building, right? Just about. So then the problem is now they go up to 300,000 and we have the issue that we were having. So, which was a lot of buildings that were not doing anything. They were leaving exposed brick walls, which is not historic, by the way. That's not restoration either. But leaving exposed brick walls, which is passing the cost and the discomfort, and the buildings were having problems onto the tenants. So the utility bills of these first-time home buyers are crazy, but they look cool, right?
This isn't about tenants. I don't know why you mentioned tenants. These are people that are owning their own homes.
Home buyers, right? Condos. So these were condos that are sold, plus the little homes that we have. That it's absolutely 2 families, 3 families.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a major issue. We're down there with mold issues and durability issues constantly on these buildings. So
we did get a comment about that, it being higher for historic buildings, especially in neighborhoods like over the Rhine, and it's hard to do the full lead choices in historic. So that is coming up in the chat bar.
We really need to take it back up to 750, I think.
750, which one?
In the historic restoration.
What do you mean?
So adding it back in.
I don't see how we can do 400,000. I mean, it's just not feasible.
What's that? Oh.
So are you saying that they can do these historic restorations and not do any LEED or HERS or energy efficiency and sell it, which means the cost for maintenance and for energy is put onto the owner? And
if this is residential, this isn't commercial. So it's the owner that's building it.
Right. Well, then it's the owners that are then going to buy, a new owner is going to buy it, and they won't know what they're getting into until they get in there. And they get saddled with very large bills. Yeah, this happens a lot.
The point is I don't think you can do an historic restoration of an old building for $400,000. I mean, I think that's ridiculous. And Paul, I know you agree with me.
No, I think it's tough. I would agree, but I mean, it doesn't mean you have to be under 400, right? It just means that's the max incentive. So if they did it for 500,000, right, they're getting.
They'll walk away and not do it at all for that. And that's what we're trying. What the whole point of this is to try and promote restoring old homes and having affordable housing and keeping people from doing tricky, unethical things in various parts of the city. I mean, those are the things we were trying to do. So this is a piece of it that we need to make as comfortable as possible to get these buildings back into use.
okay, so what if we the years down to 12, and then we get the 100,000 plus 3 more years and bring it back up to 15 for the historic renovation remodel
Still only
if
400,000.
if it's hers. But it's 3 more years of 400,000.
Yeah, so that's the equivalent of another 10,000 a year. So that's a $30,000 incentive added to the end.
If you've got the money, if you've got the extra 350,000 up front in the beginning.
Well, they would have to have that anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, I think of it all the time as the dollar amount, right? Spent the total dollar amount of the incentive. I mean, there's, like I said, if the cap of the max abatement they'll give you is, let's say, 400,000. Again, if you have 500,000 of improved value, just 400 is covered. You have to pay on the other 100. It doesn't mean you can't get it, right? So you have that. And you gotta remember, these are gonna appreciate, hopefully, right, over value.
Why is the,
Why do we put it at 750 and we put hers or whatever, if possible?
Well, the hers one is possible for everybody. So that's why that is a much lower than lead. So
Okay.
That's kind of why I was putting that. I think that's what you're going to get a lot of, quite frankly, for the harder ones.
We just need to move on.
Yeah.
a quick question. Why is the term masonry listed for the 1940 mark? And why do we make that specification?
Yeah, there's some parameters that are used in some of our affordable housing programs and other programs that, again, that might be, you might have zoning and planning commission change some things there, but that's been brought up as one of the harder ones to do. So in your masonry buildings pre-1940, if you're going to get into the insulation, you're getting into plaster, lath. It's much harder than getting into a framed and re-insulate.
Yeah, but do we really want to restrict it to that?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. I was just trying to make it as flexible as possible.
Well, so yeah, the point is that those type of buildings tend to be a little more expensive, a little harder to go and renovate to that level, where a frame building is not. If anybody tells you it is, it's very easy to get insulation back into there in that range.
But we're restricting it too much. Think simple.
Okay, so, I mean, and if the goal is to preserve historic houses, no matter what they are, I guess it seems like we can take out masonry, but do you want to keep it as an additional cap, or do we want to put it back into?
Okay, so I'm gonna say a strong, if you take out masonry and that historic extra 100,000, that's
Don't need it. If we have it at 750, we don't need that extra 100,000.
If it's in the 750, I'm going to strongly recommend that we then have still the minimum in the lead or otherwise. It can't be that. You will have every building and over the Rhine, every single family home and over the Rhine will then not go lead. And we finally have them moving all in the right direction. The amount of lead renovations we have went up 400% 2 years ago. It went up 600% last year because it's only been in place for 3 years. It takes time and we'll literally cut the legs off of that momentum. These buildings are getting so much better and so much lower cost to operate, and we'd go the opposite direction. That would leave a big hole.
Yeah, there is a question about, with the term masonry, if this would exclude wood construction, historic structures, and how that would play into everything.
Yeah, I don't support it as being a separate category. If there's a bonus, I think that could make sense because you're trying to help them out. And we can discuss the type of construction. That was just an option. But as a separate category, it would.
But you're saying you don't think it should be hers, you think it should be lead? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying I'm open to maybe being hers or lead. But now, again, every one of these does one of the other issues. So if we take out the masonry, they're gonna do every pre-1940 building. So that would be another 100. That's gonna, yeah, I don't mind that, but I don't know if that helps you. Because I mean, I'd love to know this number, but I mean, you've got to think that probably 50% of the big rehabs at 750 is even going to matter, right? That's a big number. We're not talking about just redoing your kitchen. So for real rehabs of a house, that's gonna pre-1940 gotta be the lion's share. It's gotta be over 50% of all the really like either gut rehabs or big renovations anyway. So I don't know that it helps you without going there anyway. That's why I think that the bonus is better, because you can add it on to any one of the levels.
But there seems to be some consensus about that we would be okay about adding frame houses. But I mean, but you're saying a separate category?
I don't know. Like I said, I just wanted to kind of to give flexibility. Almost to Carol's point, I was actually looking at giving flexibility. That's why the 100,000 bonus, I think it'll be easier for economic development to measure it, right? So I think you're going to have pre-1940 buildings that can be, again, if you have to define if that's a different scope of work, historic renovation, restoration. If it's not, it's the same work. It's just work on a building of an older age. If that's truly the only difference, then.
And that's the point. The older the building, the more work there is that needs to be done to it.
Usually, I would agree. But again, we gave it a $750,000 cap by itself. So really, I guess that's my point, is all we're really doing is if we want to give an extra bonus to older buildings, then just put a $100,000 bonus. The 750 is now going to make it.
I don't think we need the $100,000 bonus if we've got the 750.
Instead of, he's saying instead of.
Yeah, instead of, that's right. I'm saying I don't think that cap, the 750 extra category, I don't know why we need that category. Just make it a bonus. It's easy. Like visitability, that's a direct cost extra. And it matches the investment someone would have to make at every level.
Okay, it looks like we need to take a vote again.
Okay. So with historic renovation and restoration, we're talking all pre-1940 buildings, masonry, frame, all. The first option A will be to keep it under remodel criteria at 750 as a cap. Option B is to move it to bonus with a additional $100,000 cap.
And only 300,000 as the initial remodel amount. So the total would be 400,000.
No, if they go lead, then they get it 100,000 on top of any one of those levels.
So 500,000.
So at silver, it would be 600,000. At gold, it'd be 750, and at platinum,
Okay.
900.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So Carol, option A.
Along with that, what about a year bonus?
I think it comes out. I don't know that we need to do 2 dials for that. I mean, again, we could, but again, it comes down to whether or not we start at 12 or 15. Right.
Let's keep with the 2 options. So option A is highlighted in yellow. Option B is highlighted in orange on your screen. Carol, option A or B?
A.
Okay. We have Eve, option A or B?
I honestly don't care now that we've added the frame piece, but A is better.
Mark Corey?
A.
Let's see, Paul, thank you.
Strong B.
Okay. Sharon
That doesn't
Watson
get you 2 votes.
on the call.
And
Callie, if she's still on the call, do you have a preference?
No preference.
Okay, and then Heather Sturgill.
B.
Okay, so with 3-2, option A, highlighted in yellow, seems to be the preference, or is the preference. So, okay. With that, I want to take less than 3 minutes to decide these year terms.
Please.
Well, and I don't want to decide them. It's the working group.
No, I know, I'm going with the short period of time.
Yes. So so there are, at this point, there are no additional year terms. So do we want to keep these at 15 years? Or what do we want?
That would provide the most incentive, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I liked 15 years for down the line.
For every type of remodel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not the base remodel. I wouldn't recommend that at all. That'll cut LEED in half
Okay.
for the affordable housing. Most affordable housing, it would have cut it in half.
You're talking about the remodel,
Yeah.
12 years then.
Well, okay.
No.
So this is the recommendation in gray here.
We don't have terms on the new construction.
Oh, I believe, oh, maybe these were the terms that were originally proposed. Are we comfortable with these, or do we need to change these year terms? Right now it's 10 years for new construction and then 15 years for any new construction plus the green building option.
The difference between the new construction and the remodel, you're not going to get remodel. You're going to have the buildings torn down and new construction.
New construction and a remodel. Which one and which one? Oh, the base and the base.
Yeah, they're both 200,000, and the only difference is 2 years.
Okay,
You're
we'll
not
put
gonna
12,
get remodel.
put 12 under new construction then. That's fine. No, the top one, the
No.
top one.
What? That's the wrong direction than I was commenting.
Yeah, 12 with the new, she's saying 12 with the new construction by itself, and then the other 3 would still be 15. The new construction, silver, gold, platinum would all be 15.
Right, yeah.
No, I was actually saying that new construction needs to go down to 7 so that we actually incentivize remodel.
Yeah, so
We're trying to make it as friendly as possible for low income and affordable housing, so.
I think
Exactly, which is why you need to incentivize the remodel more than the new construction.
those are big, and I mean, they got 100,000 or 150. We moved another 50. I was proposing 100 each. The two of them, you moved to 150 over. Plus now the other renovation, this pre-1940 is going to hit, I think, over half your renovations of big rehab. So that's going to be another 100. That's going to go up to 750. You're going to have plenty of remodel. That'll incentivize. I will tell you right now, half the developers for sure immediately will not tear down like they used to. And I can convince the other ones. I'll have to put work on the other ones. The first half will get it in 2 seconds. So,
These are supposed to be people who are doing this, not developers.
but the developers create the product. I mean, they're the ones that put 85% of the product out there. So you
Okay.
gotta make them. And
So what are you saying, Paul? What is it that you're saying?
I'm agreeing with what we have here. I don't love 12. I'd rather have 10. I don't think the gap's as big as I'd like it, but I mean, I understand where we're going with that. That's why I want to remodel at 10 and not 12. I'd want new construction base and remodel base at 10 and 10. Those are code minimums. Just to give you an idea, New York.
Okay, let's do new construction without the lead at 10 years, but we're going to keep the remodel at 12.
Now you're getting somewhere. Yeah, that puts a little extra. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the recommendation. For the criteria cap and term, we're going to move on to the other recommendations with 15 minutes left. I do want to make a note that someone in the chat bar asked about how those caps were determined. And Paul, I know that you sent out a bunch of reference materials that were sent to the working group and community members, but we can talk offline if you have, Carol, Dan as well, so we can get some more information out to community members about how those caps were determined.
That'd be great.
So Moving on to immediate recommendation 2. So this recommendation states that residential buildings with up to and including 4 units should be eligible for residential tax abatements. We discussed this a lot during the last meeting. So right now, the current policy is that it's up to 3 units. So this would be increasing it by 1. And the discussion was that, and Eve, please feel free to step in if I misrepresent your thoughts, but that, you know, the school board would prefer to not lose any revenue, but is supportive to seeing more units available to families, which would be achieved by this recommendation. But there would be a concern, at least from the school board, on increasing this unit amount any further. There was a statement made, and I forget if it was the vice mayor or Carol, about there not being a desire to increase unit eligibility above 4 units. However, there has been some feedback from working group members and community members about increasing this to 8 units.
It's going to have to be a separate issue.
Okay, so maybe this is the 8-unit increase. We move down to maybe a long-term recommendation discussion, but that recommendation 2 will remain as is for now.
Agreed.
Okay. Section 2 of the aims of the recommendations. So these 10 statements are what these recommendations aim to do. So and a lot of this came up in our conversation. So not reduce affordable housing, encourage reinvestment in existing affordable housing, not reduce overall unit growth, encourage units appropriate for a family of 2 or more bedrooms, encourage low cost and long-term home ownership through environmental design, and group building, encourage transparency on residential abatements, consider investment incentives of our local competitors, consider overall tax rates and how abatements may impact opinions of new tax levies, encourage small minority-owned and women-owned businesses and small-scale developments. The Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors submitted a comment that this is a priority of theirs, and then to encourage historic conservation. At the moment, these recommendations are not in any order. So instead of being 1 through 10, they should be bullet points. Are there any thoughts on editing these aims of the recommendations, prioritizing them in any order, or just moving forth with how they are written?
I like the idea of moving 9 to 1.
Okay.
And encouraging reinvestment as the second one.
So like that, Carol?
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other comments from the working group on this section, or Andy, any comments in the chat bar regarding these?
No, I'm not seeing anything related to section 2 here.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'd like to see more family style housing, 2 bedrooms or more. I think that's desperately needed.
When it moved up, is that what you're saying?
Yes, please.
Okay.
To the third priority, or so number 2 and number 3 are kind of connected in some ways. Would you feel comfortable with it being 4?
I guess, yeah.
Okay.
Samantha, there is interest in moving up transparency on residential abatements.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. And I'd make sure the previous 4 and 5 about not reducing quantity of affordable and encouraging reinvestment in affordable, those just stay high. If we push anything down, keep them as high as we can.
It seems like there are a lot of these are priorities.
Yeah.
Are there any, would it, instead of having them 1 through 10, do you feel comfortable making them bullet points and saying that they aren't in a priority order?
Absolutely.
And, okay, and that they're all equally important. Okay.
Samantha, would it be possible that what used to be number 9, to consider overall tax rates and how abatements may impact opinions of new tax levies, could that be a little bit more explicit? I know hopefully what we're trying to say is not necessarily, so significantly reduce revenue or what have you, but we've kind of gone around. I think that's correct, but it seems like it could be a little bit more explicit about the attempt not to necessarily reduce existing revenue. That would be helpful for the board.
So the recommendations of this group aim to consider overall tax rates and how abatements may impact opinions of new tax levies and they also aim to not reduce existing revenue.
Or not necessarily. I mean, you don't have to be quite so explicit. You can be a little bit more diplomatic, or maybe there's a way of saying that, but I'm looking at parks and everybody, this whole issue of people being kind of cash or revenue poor, particularly now.
So considering overall tax rates and how abatements may impact being tax levy friendly. I've never seen a tax levy that I would make friends with, but Yes, you have. That's not true.
I can honestly tell you, even the ones I like, I don't want them.
Yes, you have.
But I don't know. I think Samantha's was clear and explicit, but I maybe not necessarily.
But she can work on that later.
That'd be great.
I think we know what you
work
want.
on it later, Carol.
Yeah.
Okay, we will make that note, Eve. Thank you.
Thank you.
So section 3 are the considerations for implementation. So the first consideration was that to ensure that property tax values do not diminish from pre-abatement values, including lot splits and tear downs, by first requiring information on the abatement application to help the auditor track land sales and splits from parent parcels. And that the abatement should be reviewed every 3 to 5 years to ensure that they are not overly inflating neighborhood property values through comps, and that this review should include community input. Any comments on that first consideration?
Actually, I like that, and it can be worded other ways, but that's a kind of explicit approach or explanation that I would like to see on the other in some way, the one. I think that's a good guide.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. Especially the primary item there, it's a big one to give faith for people that it works. I will say on the review, it has to be reviewed. Once we put transparency in here, the review will be able to happen by economic development consistently. But on a public level, my only issue is don't make it political. If it goes too short term, it'll be a lot of energy. To a lot of administration costs and energy and get political again. So I love review, but I love constant review. And so going back out every so on, I think it should be closer to 5 or longer, but it should happen consistently. We haven't had any real ones in 20 years. So it should be done, but shorter is not necessarily better in this particular case. If we get data constantly, and economic development can update us.
If we go to figuring out how doing the research we need to get to an actual tiered system, that would probably take a couple of years, and we would want to review all of this at that time.
That's right. That'll count as our first big one. Yeah.
Right.
So do we still want to keep it at, I was hearing a longer time period, but since we're not sure when that tiered system might be explored more, do we want to still keep it at 3 to 5 years right now? Some flexibility.
It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we could leave it that way, or we could just put that it will be reviewed in 3 years.
Yeah.
Well, Paul was saying it needs to be longer, and we do need to depoliticize this.
This is just the first review, Heather.
Okay.
We are getting comments that people in the chat are suggesting every 3 as well.
Okay.
All right. So let's keep it at 3 to 5, and then I'm going to put a note in there about it will absolutely be reviewed before any tiered approach is being explored. The second consideration was that current staff may need to be increased due to long-term monitoring as needed. I believe this went in when tiers were being considered, and it was thought that more staff would be needed to implement and administer that program. My question to the group and to Dan is would this still be necessary without the tiered system?
The proposal we could implement with current staffing. We could look at this again when they do the review.
Okay, then I'm going to take this out of here and put it in section 4. Another consideration is that adequate notice should be provided about the policy change to developers, homeowners, et cetera, and that triggers for grandfathering applicants under the current policy should be considered. We did receive some comments from a community member who is currently undertaking or applying for a residential tax abatement for LEED Platinum new construction, I believe,
Yeah.
and was curious about what does this look like? How much notice? Do you want to add more details or kind of leave it at this now and then decide details later?
I think this is fine for now. This is very important. Yeah, I get about 10 of those calls a week. So I wish no offense, I wish other people would get them. But
I got some emails over the weekend.
yeah.
So
the interesting part here really is going to be by the notice. We've had a precedent before, so I think we've got some starting point. But just keep in mind, this maybe goes on to the review, is that some of the best developments, there's some amazing developments that for affordable housing and other stuff that have taken, quite frankly, 5 to 7, 8 years, right, to come to fruition. And that's a lot of money they've invested in time. And if all of a sudden, even if it's like given 6 months notice, but it completely changes the financials and their banks drop out, that sucks. I mean, just keep that in mind.
No, I think we have to grandfather, and I think we have to take that little bit of time to look back at that and then take that into consideration. You're absolutely right. We cannot screw somebody just because we start sitting here doing this on a Monday afternoon.
Yeah. But if we figure that out, then more review is great, right? Because then people can feel confident about the investment they're making.
Right.
But otherwise, you'll get people to be a little gun shy.
Okay. So I know we're at 4:30 right now. I do want to get, if anyone is able to stay just a little longer to finish this up. But before, if people do have to dip out, I do just want to acknowledge that Section 4, the long-term recommendation is to explore a tiered approach to residential tax abatements. And this is because in order to establish that tiered criteria, additional studies would be required, which is, something to be explored in the future. There was some concern expressed by the Home Builders Association and Greater Cincinnati Board of Realtors and some community members about the targeted neighborhood tiered approach due to some similarities to redlining of the past and fair housing concerns, which is, I think why this remains kind of something long-term that will require study. So I do want to go back to some of the comments from Heather for Section 3, but if for anyone that has to head out right now, I did just want to highlight that long-term recommendation and thank you for coming. And as a reminder for anyone leaving right now, the next property tax working group meeting is next Thursday, July 23rd, and we will have more information on our website and we will email it out. So some other considerations were submitted by Heather. Did you want to explain?
Sure. So the first one is about the companies getting residential or getting abatements, getting property abatements, and then switching from it being a residential property or long-term rental or whatever, and then or long-term staying there, and then pivoting and changing that to putting it on the short-term rental site. I saw this happen during the comments for the first short-term rental law that was being discussed and implemented. And I think that needs to be avoided. Abatements are intended to help the residents who live here, not commercial endeavors for short-term rental. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and Heather, you brought this up. I think we had this great conversation before. I just wanted to ask, the city, have you guys, I know you've already put some things into place for short-term rentals as far as actually taxes, and I don't know if there's additional fees. Finally, a process sounds like in place to collect that, and a permitting process. What have you seen? Because I've had definitely individuals wanting to do rentals, to do rental property, whether it's apartments or whatever, and then wondering if they would fall into this if they went into, kind of shorter term stuff. Where is that legally? Is that able to be done? Because I'm interested in Heather's idea.
Well, the short-term rental law is targeted at short-term rentals of less than 1 month. So it's about, I believe it's less than 1 month. I have to verify that, but everything beyond that is, longer-term rentals for residents. The short-term rental listing is, if you listed on like Airbnb, VRBO, that sort of thing. And, a lot of it is industry trying to make money off of these. It doesn't benefit our residents if it's unhosted. If it's hosted, like if the person lives there and brings people in at the same time, hosted is a different
Gotcha. Yeah.
different species.
The only caveat I'd bring up that I've heard, which is interesting for a lot of your smaller ones, which is I think why we talked about 4 units, is those duplexes, triplexes, and quads that we're really trying to promote someone, owning, right, living, having an on-site landlord, right? You live in 1 unit, you're your property manager on the 1, 2, or 3 other units.
Added income.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I'm open. I just want to bring that up, but it
doesn't change that. They can still list that as rental as long as it's long-term rental. If it's less than a month, if they're listing it, unhosted short-term rental, it's not really benefiting our local residents. It's going to people that are coming in for events.
Yeah, but you're benefiting that property owner who bought and lives there. I don't know. Would that be an interesting caveat if it's owner occupied, right, on a multi-unit? So it's helping them have flexibility in their ability to rent it. I don't know. I'm open to that. It was brought up to me with one person. I thought that was interesting.
And Caitlin, it looked like you had unmuted yourself at one point. Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to bring up the point I made earlier about engaging DCD and buildings on this particular item. The enforcement of this is something I'm concerned about, and I don't know what buildings process is with respect to inspections, how they would verify whether or not it was hosted. So I think those conversations still need to happen.
Well, hosted is if it's listed, hosted, or unhosted. That's easy to just by looking on the description. So you're looking at the list of tax-rated properties and the address. You're looking at the listings that have been registered with the city, and if they match, then you look at the listing and is it hosted or unhosted.
So is this something, of course, with the caveat that, the departments that would be administering this would need to, be consulted before this was implemented. Is this something that we would want to add as an immediate recommendation, a long-term recommendation, or just something to consider moving forward. And
And I think it's interesting to study it and look at. Definitely interesting to consider. I think I like where she's going with it. Details would matter, but I think there's a way maybe this even helps a little bit on owner occupied buildings if maybe you could give a value there. I don't know. This has some interesting spots. I know it's been a point of contention that's starting to go the right way, but to Heather's point, I don't know if there's more that can be done that might be good.
Do we have any idea if this is something that's really happening in any large numbers or?
Yeah, I posted a article that was done by the Harvard Business School, and it also has a link to the study that was done.
That's on our website.
It's on the website, yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing it in some markets, but I also see the again, like I said, I see the small guys doing it too, trying to do it on their own, and I want to make sure we don't disincentivize those guys to try to build something up themselves. But you're right, there's definitely big groups that are going out and buying just condos in major cities and putting them out at that. Anyway, I'll stay out of that. It's interesting to me. I've been looking at that topic. So
I'm actually, the more that I'm hearing, it seems like this will require a little more engagement and, with departments, and then a little more study about unintended consequences potentially. So it seems like it's more of a long-term recommendation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so short term you're saying is under 30 days. Is that correct?
Oh, in terms of the immediate, short term.
No, I mean, short term rental is at 30 days, Heather?
I believe that was the definition that was put in.
Because
that needs to be verified. It's been a while since I've looked at the law.
Because we have some developers that are buying 2 and 3 families in Mount Auburn and making them student housing. So that's, that's 9 months. That's, is that short term?
No, that's not.
Or even
Okay.
only be 2 or 3, right? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, great. Heather, what about the second comment?
Okay. Let's see. Good. Oh, this was just you needed a funding mechanism to fund the study for tiers, and it's just a suggestion of where to get the money to study the tiers. Look at the money that is going to be coming in soon from the tax abated properties that come off the tax abatement rolls, and use the first certain amount that comes off and use that to fund.
There was also a conversation about getting a student from UC to use it as a dissertation project.
Sure, but it was just a suggestion of how. Not a big deal.
Yeah. No, it's a good suggestion.
I'm going to move that just underneath this as a consideration for the long-term recommendation. And then this final comment about.
This last comment is just a way of incentivizing local housing. I'm using project downtown, and then there's another project that I've heard about that is rent equity, and where like a renter co-op, and it helps with the value of the housing, the people that take care of it better, but it's also the best of both worlds because it allows for the flexibility to tap resources and to tap equity without having to move, but also gives the option to move quicker if they get a job out of town. They just can't take the equity with them anymore if they move earlier than 5 years. So it's just something that incentivizes that, because I think it's better for everyone. It helps low-income individuals. It helps the property be better maintained, that sort of thing.
Which bullet point are you speaking to right now?
I have it on the screen.
Yeah, she just highlighted it in blue.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, we haven't had any discussion in it at all I mean, I think it's probably too late in the game to add it, in all honesty, but I think it's something that needs to be considered in the long run.
Is this something we would want to move to a long-term recommendation? Or I do know that there's probably going to be a section of the report that's kind of like, you know, the parking lot, the things that were mentioned that maybe didn't make it into these recommendations, but were brought up in conversation.
And Heather, would it fit to come out of your subcommittee group?
No, actually, this was just listening to your guys' last meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just come out of my group. I was just listening to your guys' last meeting and thought about it.
Well, let's put it in the thoughts, Samantha.
Okay, I will. I'm just. Orange means I'm gonna move it. So it looks crazy now, but it makes sense in my head. So, you know, as I said, section 4 is the long-term recommendation. So explore a tiered approach with the comments that there are some concerns about tiered or targeted neighborhood approach having some challenges or discriminatory housing issues. I think that's why a study would be needed. Does this recommendation need to be changed in any way? Because right now it's just written to explore this approach, not to move to this approach.
Yeah, no, it just needs to be explored. The issue really is, although we all understand Hyde Park, Mount Lookout, Mount Adams having issues about this, the reality is we have a handful of people that have been representing all 3 neighborhoods. And there are groups of people in those neighborhoods who don't agree with that. So we really can't move to tiers unless we do have some research into it. And that's going to cost some money and take a couple of years. So we do want to go there, but it's not something we can do now. There's too many discriminatory issues attached to it.
I agree with you, Carol.
Great. I was just about to say, Mark, I know you submitted some comments on this. Do you have anything to add or?
No,
okay.
not this time. Yeah.
And Heather, I do want to wrap up in the next 5 minutes since we're 15 minutes over, but do you have anything to add with your comments?
No, it was just concerns over discriminatory issues and what those issues might be and stuff like that. It's to be looked at when you look at tiers later on.
Absolutely. And then we moved the short-term rental caveat to this longer term recommendation considerations. Okay, with that, we made it through the 4 sections of recommendations. Thank you for everyone that's still on the call for giving us that extra 15 minutes. I do know 2 hour and 15-minute meeting is a long one. So thanks for hanging in there. If you do have any questions, or clarification stuff, please feel free to email me. We will work on getting notes out in the next few days.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everybody. That's awesome. This is great. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.